with me. I am the Ole Miss beat writer for the Daily Journal. Logan covers Mississippi State. We're missing John Pitts today. Hope to have him back next. See football in the program today. And let's get right to it. Logan, you got a big one with Mississippi State and LSU coming up. First of all, how's Thursday going for you?
Well, Thursday's going pretty good for me. As you know, just wrapping up game day stuff. You got to avoid that this week, and I get the break next week, so that'll be good. But trying to wrap up everything, all of our game previews and stuff. John likes to have that stuff in earlier in the week.
Like on Tuesday, I think, huh?
Exactly. I'm probably later than what he would like me to be on that stuff. I've got one more thing left to do, and I'll have that wrapped up. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be a big game down in Baton Rouge this week. It's kind of the first test for Mississippi State this year. They're 3-0 entered in this game. Really haven't faced a whole lot of competition. So we'll find out exactly what they got. Definitely over the next 3 weeks, starting this week with LSU. But they got 3 top 10 opponents coming up for them.
Hey, let's talk about their schedule so far, because there are a lot of similarities here between Ole Miss and State in the early going in terms of the opponents they face. Now, I really thought that Ole Miss would get more competition from Vanderbilt and Louisiana Lafayette than they have gotten the last 2 weeks. Now, I think Boise's going to turn out to be a good team, and it was a good game for Ole Miss to pull away and win in the fourth quarter. Not a lot of competition the last couple of games from Vanderbilt and Louisiana Lafayette. But as I look at Ole Miss, they've been able to execute their offense, to run their systems, and they've identified some areas that they need to improve, really running the ball on offense and stopping the run on defense. What has State learned from its 3 opponents? I think they've got 3 there that haven't challenged them too much, other than UAB. UAB got some things done on offense.
Yeah, and I think that UAB game was kind of an anomaly because they only had 1 game of film to watch on UAB. UAB had a brand new coaching staff in there, and in their first game against Troy, UAB rushed for like 338 yards in that game. So Mississippi State just really overcommitted to stopping the run in that game, and they did. UAB didn't rush the ball hardly at all against Mississippi State, but they were able to hit some big plays. They had 3 touchdowns of 75 yards or more in that game. One of those, I think, was an 88-yarder at the end with the final minute of the ball game. So some of those stats are a little bit misconstrued, but there are some question marks in Mississippi State secondary that they've got to get addressed. We saw a little bit of it last week against South Alabama. They took some shots down the field, and it's just the plays just weren't there to be. The plays were there to be made. South Alabama just didn't make them, and that was the thing. They dropped a lot of those passes, and I wasn't expecting that because South Alabama's receivers are all Alabama transfers. Those guys are 4- and 5-star players out of high school, and they just drop passes. I kind of see why Alabama wasn't necessarily missing those guys there. I really wasn't impressed with their wide receivers, but offensively, Mississippi State's been able to get a lot of things done in the first 3 weeks. So over 500 yards of offense in all those ball games, averaging close to 44 points a ball game. Really can't tell just a whole lot about the offense because the first 2 games they interchanged quarterbacks so much. Last game, Dak Prescott was the quarterback for the first 3 quarters, and I think the first series of the fourth quarter, Dak Prescott was in there too. So, yeah, it kind of turned things over to him as they approached conference play, and I think that really made a difference in the rhythm and continuity of the offense.
How about his health now? There was this issue about his ankle a couple of weeks ago. How healthy is he as they get ready for SEC?
I haven't seen him wearing any boots or anything like that, when he's came for interviews or anything like that, and he's rushed for over 100 yards in both the last 2 ball games, so he appears to be healthy, and I don't know how healthy he'll be after this LSU game. They've got a pretty stout defense that hadn't allowed any points for, I think, 31 consecutive drives. They haven't allowed any points, and they pitched a shutout the last 2 ball games, so he's definitely going to be tested this week, and Mississippi State definitely is going to rely on him heavily in their offense.
Well, I look at LSU's shutout streak of 2 games going into this Mississippi State game, and look, right now it's a small body of work. LSU has a quality win against Wisconsin where they trailed, got way behind, came back and won, played very well, ran the ball in the fourth quarter. Okay, so they have a quality win there. But after that, the shutouts have come against Sam Houston State and and my dear old alma mater, the university formerly known as Northeast Louisiana, there in Monroe, which, Monroe was actually competitive there in the first half, Logan. What was like 10-0 at halftime, something like that?
I think so. I haven't even watched a whole lot of LSU this year because their game times have always kind of been right there up against Mississippi State. So I've only seen just a few series of LSU this year. It's just kind of caught them in passing, and obviously seen the highlights.
Well, obviously, they are improved defensively. You know they're going to have speed. I read a column from Glenn Gilbo, who covers LSU for the Gannett papers in Louisiana this week. He was talking about the 4-star talent that LSU has that is as deep as third on the depth chart on defense. So they've stockpiled some talent. But as you made note of with the South Alabama receivers, the recruiting rankings aren't always right. Now, I think they are more right than they're wrong, and I've always said that if somebody's going to go to the trouble of ranking all these high school athletes and investing the time and money in that, they're going to do some good work. I mean, they're going to be some good solid evaluations that come from those recruiting rankings, but they're going to miss sometimes, like perhaps in the case of the South Alabama receivers. But it is interesting to read about the highly rated talent that LSU has that they're using right now just for depth. So they're going to have some ability. They're going to be fast, but it's hard to get all excited about this LSU defense right now, I would think, until the next several weeks, beginning with Mississippi State, a team that's just put up yards and numbers all over the place against lesser competition in 3 games. But it still goes back to the fact that you have to execute your offense and score.
Right, and what you were saying about the recruiting rankings, obviously I spent 5 years working for Rivals.com, so I was a big part of a lot of that for
It's on you, Logan. It's all on you.
Exactly. But but Dan Mullen made mention of that this week. He talked about that they had 5 stars, players as their third string players. Mississippi State I think maybe has 1, maybe 2 5 stars on the entire roster. LSU has them as second, third string guys. So, it's a completely different level of talent as far as where they were coming out of high school. Mississippi State's done a really good job developing that talent under Dan Mullen, but you're right, they've got to execute in order to win that game. I did some checking this morning, and, Mississippi State's lost 14 straight games to LSU. They haven't won since 1999. During those 14 losses, Mississippi State's turned the ball over 40 times in those games, and 15 of those have been in Dan Mullen games. Dan Mullen's 0-5 against LSU. They've turned the ball over 15 times in those losses.
All right, I'm thinking that I've covered the last 2 Mississippi State wins in this, not in the series, or maybe in the series. The last time they won was '99, you said, right?
Right.
All right, I covered that game. I was the Mississippi State writer until the 2002 season. The '99 game, State started out 8-0, and that was the Rod Gibson touchdown late. LSU had been struggling under Jerry DiNardo, and that was, I think, pretty sure before replay, and there was question as to whether or not Rod Gibson actually broke the plane and scored the touchdown that sealed the win for State. But let's go back farther. When's the last time State has won in Baton Rouge?
1991. That was Jackson Hill's first.
To secure the Liberty Bowl bid. Right. Yeah, I covered that one as well. So, but look, obviously the history is not good, but it's history, and it does matter, but not much, because there's so much turnover with players, and every team is new and has an identity. I know you hear coaches say that, and it becomes cliche, but really, to me it's about what a team has accomplished this season and where they are in terms of confidence going into any opponent's venue, and I assume that State feels pretty good about itself right now.
Yeah, they've won 6 straight games, and like I said, they've put up over 500 yards in the last 4 games. So offensively, they're clicking. They've created 26 turnovers in the last 8 games on defense. So it's a confident group that's going down to Baton Rouge, and like I said, those other games and other seasons really don't have a whole lot of bearing on this game, if at all. But going back to last year's game against LSU, Mississippi State played them close. I mean, you see that 59-26 score or whatever it was last year. Ended up being a blowout. But if you just look at that score alone, you thought that LSU dominated the entire game. That was a 5-point game going into the fourth quarter. And LSU scored 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and the wheels just kind of fell off, and things started to snowball for Mississippi State in that last quarter. And that's kind of been one of the things that they've talked about this week is playing a full 60-minute game and maybe even beyond. And, it's going to take that type of effort. Mississippi State's got to cut out on their mistakes against LSU to have a chance, especially when you're going on the road and in the SEC and playing in Death Valley on a Saturday night. Parrish, you've been there on a Saturday night plenty of times. It's a different environment when that sun goes down.
Yeah, it is. I've been there many times. I grew up in Denham Springs, right outside of Baton Rouge. Would like to have gone to more LSU games than I did. My parents weren't big sports fans or ticket holders or anything. So when you got to go to a college football game, it was a treat. And I'll tell you, more often than not, you didn't come up with tickets, or I didn't. So as many games as I have seen at LSU, I've also seen a lot of games at Southeastern Louisiana in Hammond. So, I have a bead on those two. I kind of know where to go, after the game. So, how to get in and out fast. Let's talk about Ole Miss a little bit. The Rebels up to number 10 in the rankings this week in the AP Top 25. They're number 12 in the coaches poll. Look, you know what the rankings are. It's a product of getting ranked and then continuing to win. Are they a top 10 team? I don't know, Logan. I know they are a good, solid football team that has some areas that they need to correct to be the best that they can be. Right now, this is a team that is extremely efficient in the passing game. Bo Wallace is number 1 in the SEC right now, number 5 in the nation, with a quarterback, a passing efficiency rating of 190. Okay, that's pretty good. Now you go back to the first half against Boise, he threw 3 interceptions. A lot of people are thinking, about all that talk about the experienced SEC quarterback, and they're thinking same old Bo with bad decisions and turnovers. That's exactly what it was for one half against Boise. Since then, he's thrown 8 touchdowns and 1 interception. His decisions are better. Will they continue to be good decisions? There's a history. You can't get away from the turnover history that Bo Wallace has, and the only way he can restore, I think, the full and complete confidence of his fan base is to do what he's doing right now, and that is to make good decisions and to further distance himself from the first half of the Boise game, and he's done all he can do against the schedule that the Rebels have played. He needs to continue to do that, but I think the confidence factor in him will take another step forward when he does this against SEC opponents, and that's not next week. Of course, the Rebels are off this week, open date. They have Memphis the following week, the 24th, and then it's Alabama, October 4th. It's Alabama coming to Oxford, and Wallace needs to have that kind of production against the SEC schedule, and I think he's capable of that. And the big thing we're seeing right now, Logan, with this offense is, teams have committed to taking away Laquan Treadwell more, we're hearing, than they even committed to take away Dante Moncrief. And the big thing is the other Ole Miss receivers have performed at a high level, and you're seeing Cody Core step up and make plays. He had not done that previously in his career. You're seeing Vince Sanders, who I know you know very well from Noxubee County. He's always been dependable, and he is again. Huge game last week against Lafayette. 8 catches, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lafayette committed to the Laquan Treadwell side of the field, and that left a lot of things open for Vince Sanders, and Wallace found him, and they really took advantage of that. So we're seeing play from the receivers that, frankly, we did not know we were going to see in August, because more than once we heard Hugh Freeze come to the post-game interview session after practice and talk about wanting to see more consistency from the wide receivers, wanting to see somebody step up and do something. And maybe they're all just gamers, Logan. It looks like they've answered that call.
Yeah, I've only got to see Ole Miss once this year. It was that Thursday night game against Boise to open the season, and you're right. It was kind of like a tale of two halves in that game. Ole Miss looked shaky in that first half. A lot of false starts, a lot of turnovers with the interceptions by Bo Wallace, but it seemed like they turned things on in that second half and have kind of been clicking on offense ever since. Just looking at the numbers, our games, the last couple of weeks have kind of been right at the same time. So, we've both been kind of on that same schedule the last couple of weeks. So I haven't actually got to watch Ole Miss live. You talked about the rankings and stuff. Ole Miss is ranked in the top 10 in the poll that I vote in. And, I voted Ole Miss 14th. I think that's kind of about where they are right now, just based on some of the other teams. I know I've been getting a lot of questions about how come I haven't ranked Mississippi State, and a lot of people in the state sort of just compare the two teams that they see most often, which is Ole Miss and Mississippi State. And on paper, there's not a whole lot of difference between those two, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Their numbers this season are almost identical. And I think Mississippi State's averaging more yards per game. Ole Miss is averaging a few more points per game this year. So they're wondering why we're ranked Ole Miss 14th and don't have Mississippi State ranked just yet. And it's really just based on competition. That game against Boise, I don't know how good of a team Boise is this year. I know they were pretty good in the past. I don't think they're quite as good as they have been being. So that jury's still out on Boise State and how big of a win that is. But right now, that's a bigger win than what Mississippi State's been able to accomplish.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as far as Boise right now, that they're winning and they're playing well, and they've gone on the road and won. And so I think that's going to turn out to be a quality win. Like I said, I really thought that both Louisiana Lafayette would provide more competition than they have the last 2 weeks. But you talk about voting in these polls, and I'll tell you, this has been my experience. Number one, I think 14 is a good place for Ole Miss right now. You get in a poll, and it's just the nature of the poll that as other teams lose, if you keep winning, you're going to rise. And I'm not sure that Ole Miss is a top 10 team. I think that 15 range, I think they're there. They're very good on defense. They gang tackle, they have speed, they fly to the ball. They've got to get better at stopping the run. They've been able to do that at spots the last 2 weeks, but in some other spots in the game, both Vanderbilt and the Cajuns had success in the run game. Were able to move down the field. Number one thing Ole Miss has done is not give up touchdowns. They're very good in scoring defense right now, just giving up 10 points a game. Lafayette drove right down the field in the running game, got to the 6-yard line and fumbled. They ended up scoring a touchdown much later in the game when it was way out of hand, but I'm not saying it would have been a different game in terms of Ole Miss winning and losing had Lafayette gone in and punched in that touchdown in the first quarter and not turned it over. They had a head full of momentum at that time. They were really executing their offense well because they don't like to pass. When the Rebels got a couple of touchdowns up on them and forced them to pass, well, that played hands because that's not the preference for Louisiana Lafayette. But had they punched in a touchdown there, made it 7-7, they still don't win. But it changes the tone of the game right there, Logan, and maybe it takes Ole Miss a little bit longer to pull away and really take control. But the Rebels need to fit their run defense better. That's been a big thing for Dave Womack, the defensive coordinator, a big point of contention. They've got to play more assignment-sound defense in their run game. But bottom line is they're very efficient on the back end, leading the nation right now with 8 interceptions. Their cornerbacks right now, Sinquez Golson and Mike Hilton, are playing at a high level. They're breaking on balls and getting turnovers. And, they're not giving up a lot of points. The other thing, we've talked a lot about the Ole Miss defensive line this year. This group generated a lot of excitement in August, and they're playing well. They're getting some pressure on the quarterback. We're not seeing a lot from them right now in terms of the measurables, the statistics that you think of with dominant defensive line play, and those are tackles for loss and sacks. But what we are seeing are the opponents who are so aware of that pass rush that they're getting rid of the ball early. A lot of 3-step drop, a lot of just getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands as quickly as they can. So that's respect for the pass rush of that front seven. So anyway, it's been a very good defensive stretch for Ole Miss through 3 games, and as on offense, there are areas for the Rebels to improve, most notably run defense.
Yeah, I'm actually really impressed with Mississippi State's defense as well. Their front seven's playing lights out. I mean, Preston Smith especially. I mean, he's won 3 straight Defensive Lineman of the Week awards, and that's never been done since the SEC started issuing that award. And he's just playing at an exceptionally high level the last 3 weeks, and he's doing it all. He's getting sacks, rushing the passer, tackles for loss, interceptions. He's returned one of those interceptions for a touchdown. He's blocked 2 field goals this year. So the guy's just kind of been all over the place. It kind of goes back to the Liberty Bowl. He started, he's the defensive MVP of the Liberty Bowl, had a really good game in that one. He's kind of stepped his game up every single time from that game on. And I know Mississippi State's hoping he has another big game this year, and he's creating a lot for other teams. Jeff Collins, we talked to him earlier this week about Preston Smith's play, and the play that he remembers more than anything that he did in that South Alabama game was he broke through 3 different blockers to flush the quarterback out of the pocket for Chris Jones to get a sack. And he flushed the quarterback stepped up in the pocket, and Chris Jones was sitting there waiting on him. So not only is Preston Smith putting up some big stats, but he's opening up some other plays for some of those other players. Now, Mississippi State's been stout against the run this year, but LSU's been running the ball over 70% of the time this year. So it's going to be strength on strength Saturday, and it's just going to be one of those good college football games. It's going to be one in the trenches. So I'm looking forward to it. Just getting to see finally getting to see a quality opponent for Mississippi State and being able to kind of judge just exactly how good they are this year.
Well, shifting gears a little bit, a couple of other SEC on SEC games this week. I call it SEC on SEC violence. Florida going to Alabama. Vanderbilt, where is that game? Vanderbilt in South Carolina. That's not that it matters. That is in Nashville. Let's start with Florida, Logan. I mean, they put up a lot of points. They had a season opener that was canceled. They put up a lot of points against a weak opponent. Now they're all about tempo and spread this year. They've got former Ole Miss assistant Kurt Roper there, who was with David Cutcliffe in Oxford and then again at Duke. So it's a total new offense for Florida. But the team that I was more impressed with, I thought last week, was Kentucky, when Florida and Kentucky played in Gainesville. And maybe that's because I was not expecting it from Kentucky. But Kentucky, is a much improved team, and I thought kind of got jobbed a little bit. It looked like that should have been a delay of game call there in the second overtime. But that's we talk about the State and LSU streak and how State has struggled in that series of late. Same thing for Florida and Kentucky. Obviously those teams have been very different for most of that streak. Florida a lot better and Kentucky with a lot less talent. But Kentucky has come on. So I don't know exactly what to expect against Alabama for the Gators. I think they'll get some things done on offense. I know that Alabama is going to be a little bit thin in the secondary for this game, and they've had some issues there early this season. I still think Alabama takes that game in Tuscaloosa and probably doesn't sweat a whole lot.
I think so too, and I do think Florida is improved from last year's team, just due to the fact that they're healthy. They had so many injuries last year in so many key positions that they really just couldn't get anything consistently done because they had so many guys hurt and were relying on so many inexperienced players out there in key positions. The one matchup I'm looking forward to between Florida and Alabama is Amari Cooper versus Vernon Hargraves III at cornerback. I really think that he's probably the top cornerback in the league, and Amari Cooper is obviously one of the top wide receivers in the league. So it's going to be a fun matchup, and I've heard that he's going to shadow him all around the field. No matter where he lines up, that's going to be the guy that he's on. So I'm looking forward to that matchup.
That's going to be good on good, as Houston Nutt used to say, good on good. So you're right, 2 elite players there going head-to-head in Tuscaloosa. In Nashville, South Carolina, a lot of people wrote them off after they were really embarrassed on opening night at home against Texas A&M. And all of a sudden, they pick off a big win against Georgia. Still don't know what to make of the Gamecocks defensively, but that's not going to matter a whole lot against Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt just does not have a lot of weapons on offense. And as far as I can tell, they've still not settled on a quarterback, although maybe that's going to be Patton Robinette. who is a little bit more mobile than the Phillip Rivers brother that they committed to for the whole game against Ole Miss. And one thing I remember from the Vanderbilt-Ole Miss matchup that stands out, Logan, is Stephen Rivers was 6 for 25 passing. Same kind of road map to the win for Ole Miss as the Rebels had a week later against Lafayette. They got out in front. Vanderbilt had some success running the ball. Ralph Webb is a good player. They had some success with that early against Ole Miss. They got away from it a little quicker than I thought they should have, even on that opening drive when they were just sticking it down the Rebels' throat. All of a sudden, they passed on first down. I know you want to be balanced. I know you don't want to be predictable, but the pass wasn't even close, and then all of a sudden they get 4 yards on second down. You got a 3rd and long. Drive just stopped. But if you force Vanderbilt to pass, the talent just is not there. And there were passes that Stephen Rivers made against Ole Miss, 6 for 25. He probably would have been 12 for 25 or maybe 11 or 12 completions if they still had a Jordan Matthews-type talent at receiver, and they just don't. So they've got some issues there at Vanderbilt. I think South Carolina gets another win. I'll tell you something else about South Carolina. All of a sudden, that Week 2 win against East Carolina picked up a little bit of luster after those Pirates knocked off Virginia Tech last week.
East Carolina was actually the only team I really got to see last week. I got to catch a couple of quarters of that before I had to leave to go to South Alabama. I watched a couple of quarters in the hotel, and I was impressed by East Carolina. And that's you're right. I think that win by South Carolina is going to be big. Looking later on in the year, because I think East Carolina is a team that has a possibility to be ranked by the end of the year. I think they're that quality of an opponent. I do think that first game, is so telling. I think a lot of people have written South Carolina off because they did not play well against Texas A&M in that game. And I think we're learning that Texas A&M is a lot better team than many of us expected them to be. So it's going to be a huge, I guess probably a huge way for Texas A&M to kind of gauge where they kind of sit in the SEC West, because we all expected the Alabamas and the Auburns and the LSUs to always sit atop there, and I know Mississippi State and Ole Miss were kind of those dark horse picks to win the division, all that kind of stuff. But nobody really talked about Texas A&M, and they had a lot of talent on that roster, a lot of unproven talent, and I think we're seeing that they're not having a whole lot of drop-off from where they were a year ago.
And I think you're right. We do need to gauge where Texas A&M is in the Western Division. Obviously, they're going to be very good, but since that opening win against South Carolina, they've had that schedule where you can't really tell, and you're not going to be able to tell anything from them really this week because they're going to SMU, which is, a program in transition right now with the head coach already having resigned 2 games in. So, we're waiting for A&M to get a little bit more to the meat of their schedule. Obviously, they are still playing well, which tells me the MVP for the last couple of years was Kevin Sumlin, the coach, and not Johnny Manziel, the quarterback. So, yes, we do need a further read on Texas A&M. Tell you what, keep an eye on Arkansas, with 438 rushing yards against Texas Tech last week. I look at that and I think, well, they're doing what they do. They're executing their offense. They're running the kind of offense that Brett Bielema said he was going to run. He ran it at Wisconsin. He's building that kind of team at Arkansas. And look, we both saw Arkansas last year. We saw the talent in the run game. We saw Jonathan Williams and Alex Collins. We know what they can do on the ground. Ole Miss pulled away from them. They weren't very good defensively last year. I know State struggled, and Little Rock had to go to Arkansas overtime to win, but was able to pull that off there, their first win ever in the state of Arkansas, I believe. But I look at this Arkansas run game. I look at Ole Miss's problems in stopping the run early on, and I think that could be an interesting matchup for the Rebels in Fayetteville later this year.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the way Arkansas runs the football. I was a voter for the All-SEC team last year, and Alex Collins got my vote for Freshman of the Year. I mean, he was just a beast at running back. I'd put him up against any running back in the league. I think he's, maybe not on the same level as a Todd Gurley or some of those running backs that Alabama have, but he's one of the top backs in the league, no question about it. And I really like their running game. I was very impressed with it when I saw them in Little Rock last year. The funny thing about that game is a lot of people don't remember that Dak Prescott didn't play in that game in Little Rock. He wasn't available. Tyler Russell wasn't at 100%, so it was Tyler Russell, and then he got hurt in that game, and they had to go to a true freshman in Damian Williams who actually scored the winning touchdown there in overtime to give Mississippi State the win. So, Mississippi State wasn't at full strength in that ball game, but still found a way to win, and that's kind of where this confidence got from that team in this 6-game winning streak. That was the first win of that streak.
Hey, folks, that's it for this week's edition of Talking SEC Football with Logan Lowery, Parrish, Alford. And next week, we hope to have John Pitts back with us. Come back and join us.